Now. Hello. It sounds like I was posing for that one. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Wanda. Hello,
Just
Davey. So, hello, Linda.
hello.
Hey, Chrissy.
Who else do we have coming in? Oh, Pam Roberts is there. I'm just going to admit her. We've got artists and artists and artists. Jen D'Entremont is here. This is a nice big group, which is great. And I'm just going to stay off screen if I can. Do I have to mute myself now? I'll just stop video of me. Nobody, you can hear my voice. There we go.
Well, we can see your drink.
Now you can see my drink. Well, I held up my real drink for you before I left.
Oh, good.
Did you? It was the invention of this year, the Krabby Wassailor. Wassailer.
Wassailor?
I didn't know whether it was Wassailer or Wassailor.
Who knows? Who cares? Drink it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay, whoever is here, we're excited to have you. It's a celebration of the season a little bit, and a celebration of a new exhibition that Chrissy Nickerson has been working on diligently and valiantly through ups and downs over the last 3 or 4 months. And excited to see it. It's all based on her travels through the Highway 93 and a little bit beyond in both directions. And I feel like it culminates what for Chrissy has been an overwhelming year of change. The development in her career this year is almost unprecedented. Last year and this year just dedicated to a path of celebrating place by actually being there, this kind of moving to a new locale and living it for a month at a time and then creating a body of work based on it, has completely enlivened her trajectory as an artist, not necessarily just the commercial part of it, but I think in terms of the quality of the work as well. That's my personal view on the whole thing. I feel like this is leaps and bounds again, beyond the last body of work. This time last year, actually, we were doing a show this time last year here in Canmore, which was beautiful as well. But this is, again, another big step. So I'm thrilled to introduce Chrissy. The format of this is going to be completely different. So we're not doing 35 questions. She's gone through that before. What I really want is to flash some imagery up on the screen. I want a little bit of discussion. I think Chrissy's just going to tell you a little bit about process and place. And then I'm hoping that everyone will open up their mics and it'll be a free for all of question asking, because what we really want this to be is an engaging, deeper kind of conversation about the creation part, how it's done, why it's done, and little details. So I've actually blown up some of the imagery so that you can get a little deeper into some of the paintings and talk a little bit about process. So I'm going to open it up at that. I'm going to stay quiet for the rest of it and leave it to Chrissy. I'm going to flash some imagery up as we go. And I invite you to turn on your mics and to ask Chrissy questions and to participate in a broader discussion amongst yourselves. Okay. Turn it over. This is a great image of Chrissy's studio in process as she was kind of fighting space and place. It was a big deal to try and find the space to keep them around her. And this was maybe a month ago, this image. And so I leave it with you, Chrissy.
Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, I'm super excited about Held by Mountains. Yes, I painted it over the last 4 months or so. And yeah, so it is an intimate studio space, and I definitely enjoy painting on multiple images at a time and, finding my way there. It's always nerve-wracking to know how they're going to look together in one white space, clean. But Cheryl always does a good job at finding that balance in a gallery. So I'm super excited to see it over the holidays. The artist statement held by mountains. I wrote probably 4 of these, and then Dave Iso did a rewrite. It's super poetic and beautiful. Should I read it?
We can read it.
Sure, I'll read it. It's only 3 paragraphs. It's basically about 3 themes: natural history, climate change, and then human stories. And as an artist trying to paint, well, it's a landscape show, but artists are always trying to have those social conversations that are important to society and relevance of self and all those dynamics. So I thought Dave did a pretty good job at this interpretation. So the wolf pack in my head talks of balance and boundaries. It teaches me about spaciousness. It teaches me to step lightly with respect for lichen and quartz, for waterways, for big game running under far-reaching skies. You won't see any animals in my paintings, but they're there. Listen, these landscape paintings are canvases for creatures to inhabit, and they hold a few of those delicate, hardy animals that we call stories. History tells me stories I can't see, but I can paint them. For Elevation Gallery's Held by Mountains exhibit, I painted a tribute to the heroic nurse named Edith Cavell, 1865-1915. You won't see her face or figure, but you can see the mountain ramparts now named for her memory. Here in Alberta, Cavell has been named a saint of peaks and valleys, of glaciers glinting in high-altitude sunsets. Painting, I learned to remember her generous bravery in a foreign theater of war. Our mountains hold Cavell's name, her story. It is written plain in the striations of the 1,000-meter cliffs of Precambrian rock. Who among us would dare to call this old ghost invisible? The person I hear pretending to be me says my story has not yet been written. It's locked up in the headwaters of now, held there, waiting to tell of glory or greed. As years warm, my story thaws, drips. My average day, my funny bone, my pace, my place, my home. How nice to paint pretty pictures, eh? How nice to hear the slow story running over bedrock, quickening and then snapping like bone. I want to drink stories, crunch them between my teeth. The earth's itself ebbs and flows, but the story's yet to be seen, and I can relate. Believe me, it's hard work, all this keeping out of sight behind the brushstrokes. So, yeah, there's a lot there, but there's a lot on Highway 93, and there's a lot in Canada's vast landscapes and in ourselves, and a lot to take in here to paint.
I skipped on, Chrissy, only because in your reading, I actually had hoped to catch it so that people could see the paint too while you were talking, but I missed the cue a little too much.
No.
So now I pulled up
Yeah.
first of a bunch of images. We're gonna just kind of run through. I picked this one first because I felt like you have the longest relationship with this painting.
Yeah. So this painting is one of 2 of the largest, and it's I think like 72 by 60. Tangle Falls. This is a cropped image of the foreground yellow bush that I liked so much. And yeah, the painting was such a struggle, and I never actually had a temper tantrum on it, but it was close, and it was really bringing me down, and I felt really bad about it. And the more paint I put on it, the more I felt wasteful and useless, and all those critical aspects to one's practice when it's not going anywhere. And so I put it outside on the deck, and it was quite cold, negatives, like really cold. And it froze, and it got frozen in time out there, and I didn't have to see it. And a couple weeks went by, and then finally I texted Cheryl, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going back into it. And she was like, go for it. So I brought it in, thawed it out, tried to do some scraping on it, and then allowed myself permission to not be reckless, but take some big moves. And if it was wasted or damaged, so be it. And giving myself that evening on my own when my kids weren't home, and giving myself the space and permission to just let go, I saved the painting with organic greens and ochres, and completely changed it from this pastel-y My Little Pony situation to this tapestry of quilting and depth and like absolute thick paint. It's visceral, and it's undeniably present with its impasto. So I really look forward to this painting finding a home, and it's going to be drying for years. It's so thick.
Chrissy, can I interrupt for a sec?
Go for it.
When I took my first painting class with you at Arts Place,
Right.
you had told the story to hell and back.
Mm.
And I've always used that with the painting. So if I'm painting and then it starts going downhill, I'm like, that's okay, to hell and back and to hell and back. And it sounds like you really went there this time with this painting.
Yeah, I did. And I feel like I've been going there a lot lately, and it's really stressful to go through that. And the quote is from Susan Fennell from NASCAD, a teacher who actually threatened me with multiple pink slips. And anyway, she would say, you're really painting when you take it to hell, but you bring it back. And that really is painting, right? Because we're not just reproducing ready-made images. We're really trying to find, well, I am anyway, I'm really just trying to find whatever I'm looking for. And, it's a process. So it can be really challenging sometimes. Yeah. So
Can I say something about this painting, Chrissy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I remember coming into your studio and seeing the yellow bush, and the yellow bush on the right was so much more in the foreground, I'll say nicely, but it was like a stick on the canvas. And I looked at you and I said, that's way too yellow. And there's too much of it. And we had this wonderful artist to artist conversation about this painting. And I was so glad to see that you pushed through and you took it to this place, because just seeing the struggle, I mean, it was, you had so much there. And then to resolve it, it took freezing it in the cold and then bringing it back in. Excellent. Yeah.
Thanks, Wanda.
Yeah.
It's
good work.
It's been interesting that like the other week Wanda came over and I had actually just stacked all the paintings or hung them. I'd put them away, and I wasn't expecting her to come over. So I had to pull out the worst ones. I was like, well, these are the worst ones. And every time I do that, she's like, yep. Well, what are you going to do about that? And then she leaves, and then I have to do something about it.
That's funny. That's funny.
But basically, it's almost like confession. And it's just like, oh,
yeah.
Confession. I feel like it's been years since we have had those kind of conversations. It's great you have somebody who will visit the studio and bring that kind of conversation. True critique. In group studio spaces where you get real critique from your cohort, there's this constant movement, but it's been so long, like real critique has happened. Yeah. So I feel like how lucky that you guys visit each other's studio and give each other that little moment of truth.
Yeah.
Hello,
Elaine.
Hi. I'm wondering if Wanda and Chrissy, if you could maybe talk about the paintings that maybe come out without going to hell, and how scary they are to accept that maybe it didn't go to hell, and also how you critique that, and how I know when I'm painting, I look at those paintings very differently with a very different lens, and I'm really suspect of them, and I know in my own process, if I kind of prefer the, you go to ugly and then you work at coming back into something that you're
Mm,
happy with,
mm.
You could go
if
first.
if that's a point of discussion at all.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
So I think that's really interesting, Eileen, because it's like for some reason, as a painter, as an artist, you always, after working many years in a studio, you think of all the times there was a struggle. So when all of a sudden things like just happen, it is very hard to accept, because you think, oh, I'm cheating now. I must be cheating because I haven't suffered enough. But really, all those hours you put in, it's bound to like, and it's serendipitous and it's intuitive and there's no reason for it. But sometimes, the spirits of paint just come together on your canvas. And the hardest thing is to say, yeah, that's wonderful, and I did it. How about that?
That is hard. Um, Drew Clausen, he's not on our Zoom, but he's an artist out of Nova Scotia. He had this post like maybe a month ago, and it was this picture of like on the way home from Dave's or something, and then it said, "I'm redefining finished," or maybe it was a question. Maybe I should redefine finished.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's NASCAD drilling into us like that struggle or the labor of of a product and the value in that. And it doesn't, they're not saying you have to labor, they're just saying you need to stand by whatever it is, I think, and call it finished.
I think
Right.
that was his point. I saw his post too, and I think it was like, just call it. It doesn't matter anymore. What this is finished to me. And I agreed. Like, I saw some of those pieces and they were incredibly, they looked unlabored in the best possible way.
But, you know,
Yeah,
Mm.
it's a crazy time when you come across that. And I think that's a perfect description, Cheryl, to be able to just nail one out and stand there and look at it and say, okay, like okay. Instead of that very labored, painful, oh my God, I'm never going to get this back. I'm going to go put it out in the freezing. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I say, I said it in the chat. I begged her to bring it in. I'm like, you can't throw it out in the snow. But she did. and it came back in, and it was like, you can just suspend an idea like that in the snow because it froze and it came back in and it's fine. And it's all learning. I think people are so focused on product. They're so focused on, this results, like, it's got to get to this place, whatever that place is. And it's like, sometimes that suspension is a great thing. Put it aside, come back, figure it out. But I mean, you just went through that with one piece where it was like, nope, that's not it. So go back, put it aside, come back, come back, come back.
Yeah, I often do that, and sometimes it's months, sometimes it's been years, and you just revisit, and I don't know where the clarity comes from, but
I think
it comes from somewhere.
I think the clarity comes from time, and how even if you're painting and you come into your studio the next day, how you see so many different things that you didn't see when you left the day before. And so, we get all wound up inside ourselves with what we're doing. And it's not like it's a totally intellectual exercise. We can say, okay, now I'm going to set this aside. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to set it aside because I can't go anywhere with it.
I think it's everything but intellectual. I think it's instinctual.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why time is so important. And it's something that people don't talk about in painting, because some paintings take, a few minutes or an hour, and some paintings can take years. And there's no reason. There's no reason for it. And there doesn't need to be.
No, it's like the sport athlete in us all, right? You're training and you're training and you're working and you're working and you're learning, and all this time is going by. And so what if one marriage lasts 25 years and it fails, but then the next one's only 3 years and it's awesome?
But it's crazy what that feels like when you're painting, like you like actual nauseousness of you can't like
Absolutely.
something isn't coming together and it's just sick. Like it's
Yeah,
just the worst
it is.
feeling.
It is. Yeah.
It's upsetting.
And it's interesting that you bring that up because I'm sure we've all felt it.
Yeah. And then want to go do
Absolutely.
that again. Like
Yeah.
yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah.
I
So
feel
that's
like
that.
though, I mean, how many artists do you think, what percentage of artists do you think could have the patience to put a piece aside for a year and go back at it? I'm not even sure. Yeah, I don't know how many people.
Well, I don't know
Ah,
if patience has anything to do with it. I get scared
mm,
of it. And it
I
goes
think
it goes in the corner and it's like, okay, when I feel brave, I can take you out again.
yeah.
I've never known how to articulate this, but this is kind of a big thing to say, but I think it's a little bit like mental health, right? A lot of us walk the line, right? You know, big feelings,
Yes.
deep
Yes, for
valleys,
sure.
all that. And some people end up having to go to the hospital or to take cocktails, like, or not cocktails, take, medicine to help them long term. But the artist has to digest that stuff. And it's extremely important for them to be able to come back and be like, okay, I'm going to finish this project now, even though I started it when I was depressed or going through a hard time or whatever. Now I'm going to go finish it. And I think if you're actually sick and you have to start taking medicine, then you can't. Most likely, you won't be able to get back and like finish that project. But I think in life, that's really what it comes down to, is being able to finish the project.
That's
Yeah,
really interesting. Go ahead, Eileen. Sorry.
I myself, I think I balance that need of finishing with I find I'm very kind of a duality of like, this very perfectionist kind of, I want to learn with every painting I make. I want to like, that's a need.
Mm-hmm.
What have I learned? How do I apply that? What does this mean? With and then the other side of being purely expressionist of what do I need to say right now? And I find more than needing to finish, as in like this is complete. I find how I'm more questioning, have I said what I wanted to say?
Does
Okay.
it sit right with you? Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I should change the word finished to return to, go back
Mm-hmm.
into a
Yeah.
project,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
finished, not necessary, but to be able to go
So,
back into a project and
Mm-hmm.
get back into it,
yeah.
move to it.
Yeah.
My
I
uncles
keep,
used to,
So,
sorry.
sorry.
I keep bringing up, bringing, the word keeps coming back to me, victory. Is there any victory in it though?
Oh, hell
Yes.
no.
Yes. Oh, but there is, because it exposes stuff to you that you cannot see any other way. And so it's this incredible mapping of worlds that are undisclosed to yourself as an artist until you're in the process of painting or making art, whatever it is. And to me, that's victory, because where else do you get that?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I don't know if I'd use the word victory. I think I'd more use like a
resolution.
yeah, or like, yeah, maybe like just a way. It's how I navigate the world. It's totally
Yeah.
how I navigate the world.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you a map to navigate the world. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
my uncles used to describe it when they were teaching me as there is different spaces, and there's craftsmen, and you can choose to be a craftsman, and that's important. There's artisans, and you can choose to be an artisan, and that's important. There's artists, and you can choose to be an artist, and that's important. And the difference between them is the time that you sit with your work. And it may not be applying the brush. It may not be. So
Absolutely.
you can sit and just look at it and spend the extra time sitting in space with the piece. And then at some point you just go, yep, now it's done. and someone, and I remember being in a studio with my brother, Mike D'Angeli, and him saying, but you didn't do anything to it. Like you just spent 2 weeks looking at it. And it's like, I know, but now it's done.
Yeah, right. I got it. Yeah,
And
that's great.
And that's the space of saying, okay, the fact that I had to sit with you as a piece and finish this conversation. It wasn't me adding any more to the conversation. The conversation just had to come to its conclusion.
Yes.
It was just time.
Absolutely. Time. Yeah.
And that's, Chrissy, you were saying that you have a rather intimate studio space. And I know myself, I have come from a much larger space, and I'm learning how to have those conversations where I'm not working, but it's a very different and more, I find it more difficult in a smaller space to see how each of the paintings are speaking to me and to one another.
Oh yeah, I long for a big studio space.
Yeah.
I dream of those awesome spaces. I'd love to have a bed in my studio somewhere.
Me too. And
Me too.
This summer at Pooch Cove, it was really awesome. Like I was up in a loft and my work was down the stairs. And so I would just sit on different stairs in, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. But I was getting up with the work. And
Yes.
it makes such a difference in how I saw it and what I saw and what time of the day it was. And yeah, it was fabulous. I loved it.
And that's the beauty of residencies like that, like Blairmore. I mean, it's the Gushel was just like that for me. I had never worked in a studio like that, and it was revealing so much things about the space that you work in and how we all have to compromise as artists in our lives because we have lives. And then every now and then you get that opportunity and it's amazing.
Yeah.
We're so lucky.
Yes.
I just want to flag back to the word victory. Is there any victory in it? Now, in this artist's statement that Chrissy read, where the person who's heroized there in the second paragraph and who has been canonized in various ways is Edith Cavell, who's famous as a nurse tending to soldiers on both sides of the conflict. So if we were to look at a conflict from the perspective of a nurse like Edith, is there any victory in war? Victory is kind of out of scope from that perspective because victory would have to be one-sided, and maybe there's something about healing and tending that's more appropriate. It's not that Chrissy had some evil painting that she needed the forces of good painting to overtake. She was healing a sick painting. Eileen was talking about that sick feeling of working with a painting that's not going where we feel it should. And she healed it. And now the painting is healthy, a sort of revised version of the earlier painting, an improved version, not a defeated or conquered piece of bad art into excellent art.
Very cool analogy.
That's really cool. Yeah. I think of that like recovery, right? It's like we're constantly recovering our paintings, and it's a wonderful thing. And at the same time, it's really daunting and challenging. Mm-hmm. And I think the victory's in the process itself, the fact that we do it.
Absolutely.
And, Edith chose to help soldiers on the other side, or on whatever sides, right? Like she helped everybody. And she had 10 weeks to repent to the Germans. And as her time went on in jail, and the last 2 weeks were like completely by herself, she wrote, I don't know if she wrote it down or if somebody took her statements or whatever, but she was like, you know what, I don't regret any of it. And she made statements of love, and like it was all about love, not about nationalism. And
right,
was so resolved in herself that it was fine. It had nothing to do with her being a woman or a nurse. Well, it had to do with her being a nurse, but it had nothing to do with her like life work. or being a woman. It was just her job as a nurse, and she gave it her all, and she died doing it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so dramatically powerful about the story, right? It's just such a
Mm.
draw to the fact that she was able to be so um, passionate and strong, like willed, right? She didn't falter.
Do you know, I really love this line in the statement about the person who I think I am right now. I don't have the statement in front of me, but that line about who I think I am right now, and I'm painting, and my story is still locked up in the present. I just find that, Davy, so very poetic, but also I think it's really relevant how Chrissy proceeds through her life with her work. The one thing that always has amazed me is how you go and you visit these places. These aren't from photographs. These aren't, these aren't made up landscapes. This is Chrissy Nickerson out there in the world doing her sketching, bringing it back and turning it into love. And I just think that that's fantastic. I just had to say it.
Thanks. Yeah, I love
You're
that
welcome.
statement too, how he wrote
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
we were talking about, I have been writing with Dave. Like Dave had migratory words, not program.
Poetry group. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been writing my whole life, probably because I was a bad student. My mom had me writing at like in grade 3. My journals start, and when I go home, I look through them. And recently, I found a journal that I didn't know I kept. I thought I only had correspondence from that time. I didn't realize I kept a journal. And sometimes when you look into your past, it can be appalling or shocking, or your perspective is constantly changing, just like it is with a painting.
Exactly.
And my relationship with self is changing, and therefore who I am changes. And yeah, so
Chrissy, can you talk about in your life what the expression of a painting does for you, or what the process does, as opposed to or in conjunction with your writing? Like, both are very different outputs of expression, and I think I'd be interested to hear that. Like, what gives you what in each of those mediums?
Right. Well, back in when I lived in Nova Scotia, I lived with, I have multiple different apartments, different relationships, different friends. Back then, I always sketched, whether I was waiting for my coffee or waiting for class to start or at night with friends. All my friends, everyone was artists. We were in college, right? And it was like living and breathing, not just work, but your line, right? Like what you were doing. And tons and tons and tons of self-portraits. The paintings and sketches were more of a journal of my life then, because I was constantly doing it. Whereas now I'd say we have multiple bodies of work, right? You've got your journal, which, I choose to work in, right? And then you've got your committed bodies of work with deadlines and titles and things that you're trying to put out there into the world, which are still very meaningful, but they're more calculated and discussed, and there's a reason for it. Not that there's not a reason for other stuff. Am I rambling?
No, keep going.
I did include a self-portrait in this recent body of work held by Mountains, not expecting Cheryl to hang it. I kind of hope she doesn't. But
I do hang them every show and every show.
But I recently told Wanda, I was like, you know what? We should all start painting self-portraits again. No, maybe not we all. I don't know. I should. Why did I stop? And so what if they're ugly or whatever? But they're definitely drops into the journal of how you feel represented. Like,
for sure, there's an incredible reflection in it. I actually was thinking of going through the last 4 or 5 shows of yours and pulling up all the self-portraits, because you do one or two for each show. And every time it's just this weird and wacky evolution of you that I think if we lined them up, it would be brilliant.
Well, when
I would love to see that. I would love to see that. Let's do
my
it.
brother a box of self-portraits, like a Rubbermaid. And it turns out he was like giving them away and letting people take them and stuff.
Does that bother
Mm.
you?
Well, it depends on if I found out who took some of them.
Well, this goes back, Chrissy, to the whole idea about how people look at artists and how people value art as a real way of life, because it's more than a job, it's a way of life, because it has to be in order to even proceed down that path. And how very, very few people really have a handle on what that entails. And so it's easy to be judged or dismissed or, called a flake because you're not a nurse or you're not a whatever,
Right. Yeah, like, sorry, but my whole household is COVID positive right now.
Oh my
Aw.
I
goodness.
wasn't going to say it, but most of us are nearing the end of quarantine, and most people, whether they're my family or not, are like, oh, well, whatever, you know what, you're going to miss your art opening, or they can't even fathom like why. It's just the significant, I don't know, it's really interesting, people don't, even now, mid-career, maybe not mid-career, but like midlife, 42, it's just really hard for people to understand what a career artist is.
They really are. The grasp of what that looks like is starting to shift, but it's so slow. It's
I agree.
painfully slow. And
Yeah.
and the mid-career artist is the real teacher. Those really long established artists, it's past, because there was no, they almost, it was almost self-perpetuating. So some of those very long established artists, it was self-perpetuated. The public believed they were flakes, so they became flakes. They didn't sort of take on the responsibility of the broader part of their career, because they had people who would do that, and the public perceived it as their duty to kind of abdicate everything to someone else. And the mid-career artist now, that 20-year career artist, 25-year career artist, is the one who has had to evolve. And a lot of it's to do with technology, which is fascinating too, because you are the generation of artists steeped in technology. And so that kind of responsibility has come along with you, which is interesting in itself. There was a question that came up on the chat, and it's a really interesting one. I'd like to know, do you have a sense that the journal is only for you, whereas a painting is a responsibility, an external responsibility? And I love the idea of any painting becoming an external responsibility.
It's an awesome question. That's an awesome statement. Yeah, the journal is personal. But now, as a mother and as someone who I have to start I've got like, a ton of them. Who will read them? What will happen to them when I die? I feel like I have to write a memoir before I die, so that someone else doesn't do it for me with someone else's voice or perspective. Or should I go all around and like label each journal with little disclaimers like Pretty White Lies, or she was just 16, or Barney lost her virginity, or I don't know, you know what I mean? So yes, they're for me, and whoever reads them in 20 years, take it with a grain of salt, right? It's a lifetime of going with the flow, and I feel like only now I'm taking, I'm making choices now more than I ever have in my life. And that's
Well,
everything.
I say those two boys owe you the grace of reading your journals
Who would want to read their
and
memoirs?
not
So
judging you.
boring.
They owe you that grace
Yeah.
at this point.
They do. They
And,
do.
the documentation of glaciers and vistas is not my responsibility, but it's a beautiful gift that I get to document that for Canada and for 100 years from now. And it's awesome, right?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful responsibility. And I'm honored that I get to talk about the Columbia ice fields, the biggest ice field in the Rocky Mountains of North America, over 300 square kilometers or something of ice, which helps combat global warming every year, right? Like, I'd say there's a responsibility, and then there's an honor in the fact that we get to have these public conversations that are extremely meaningful for the next generation. Maybe they'll learn something from reading a personal journal about somebody, going too far one direction, but to be able to go to actual art openings and have meaningful conversations and ask how this art is affecting you is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Right on, Chrissy.
I'm bringing up these images and I'm like, oh, these are such exploded views of the paintings themselves. And actually, given what you're talking about, the intimacy of what you're talking about and the kind of the myopia, these are actually perfect because people can see every single labored and not labored brushstroke in it. It's beautiful. This was one of the big ones, the snow dome. What was the snow? Where is the snow dome? Snow dome is right in the Columbia ice field, isn't it? Yeah.
It's right beside the iconic Athabasca Glacier. It's like just right up, like north, like so right beside it. And yeah, so it's the Columbia ice fields. All the glaciers I have touched on Highway 93 amalgamate into the Columbia ice fields.
So can I ask, Chrissy, with regards to what we were talking about as your paintings being an external responsibility, so that
Yes.
it's what you're offering up to the world.
Yes.
And this sort of body of work is about the idea of global warming and those ideas. That's what your artist statement is talking about. Do you feel this as a responsibility, as, an ability or that you hold the responsibility, I can't think of another word right now, to ensure that your kids, your grandkids, on and on and on, can remember this space through the work that you're providing here?
Well, I sure hope so, right? Like, as long as I follow the rules with, fat to thin, these canvases should last 500 years, right? And
Right.
By having these conversations with my children is all part of the grander scheme of communication, not scheme, communication and awareness to strive for sustainability and strive for change. And there's this, our world is changing, whether it's going to be with our generation or our kids, but within 100 years from now, the polar ice, not the polar ice, but like all the ice and like all our glaciers and stuff are going to be either gone or 95% gone. And therefore, the headwaters of now will not be here. So the face of it's just going to be a drastically different place with drastic environmental change, big time. And to talk about it is necessary, and I know it's uncomfortable. We don't have to blame anybody or anything or any reason, but it's important to talk about and acknowledge that the change is coming. And it's important, little children draw pictures of their families, and in therapy, children draw pictures to open conversations. And I might not be an environmental lawyer or in the federal government, but it is my responsibility and right to have a voice and to practice communicating and sharing, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I would say scheme is actually the perfect word, because if we do it without a plan, without sort of some structure as to how it's going to happen, one, we're leaving it to others to create our narrative, but the other part of it is going off willy-nilly, you know, even to your point, when we're using them as therapy to address the images, there is a plan in play and there is a structure to how it has to be brought forward. So you having a scheme as to how we're going to have that conversation is a beautiful idea.
Okay.
Mhm. That's so interesting, Dawn and Chrissy. You've just nailed it. Like your paintings are so embodying when you stand in front of them, and it really brings to my mind this sense of the legacy of art, period. And back to the thing about the value of art and an artist's life. That is why it has value. There's no other place that's like that. And so, right on. Good.
Thank you, Wanda.
I stuck a little quotation and credit in the chat there, headwaters of now, and attributed that to the artist in question because it appears in that artist statement, which is technically signed by me, but I've cobbled together key phrases from Chrissy's drafts. And the headwaters of now is such an intensely provocative phrase that
Yeah.
just skip the half-hour conversation, that I could say about that, but say that it's directly lifted from her drafts, plunked into the final version. It's not a piece of my writing, and it's an adaptation of what I know about Chrissy, what I know about these paintings, and what she had, my best guess at what she had tried to say in her draft statement.
That's really cool. It occurs to me that when somebody's engaging to this for this many years and to this depth in their work, that it is a great thing that there's a writer who can write about the work. And I don't know if this was a NASCAD thing or a Halifax thing, Chrissy, but I was always taught that, artists can write and they have their own voice, but sometimes it takes a writer who can put something into words that explodes the work for many people. And the art criticism that's written sometimes just gets so tedious and so labored. So it was a real joy to read a poetic art critique, because that's what it sounded like to me. And and I think real art critique comes from the artist's voice for sure. So well done, you two. Great collaboration.
Yeah, I can't wait for the next one. Or read more statements by Dave.
Yeah, it's important to have your work written about. It's important.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm excited to read your book there, Wanda.
Yeah, well.
I want to just add that at some point in history, I don't know what year, I can't remember, Wanda and her husband Tim put together one of the most beautiful projects I've ever seen, and it was writers and poets working with visual artists. And so they paired up. Was it 4 pairs?
Dave Iso and I organized that. I think
it was a gorgeous project. And I feel like, I feel like this is just a next step in such a thing, Dave. It really was a beautiful, beautiful collaboration.
Hey, while we have you on mic, Cheryl, would you take a question?
Sure. I'm here.
In the preamble to this fiasco, you talked about the unprecedented leap forward in this artist's career. I wonder if you could say a little more about the nature of that leap.
I just, and maybe it's the good fortune, the luck and the benefit of really knowing Chrissy and, knowing the long life and the interesting life that is Chrissy. So I feel like it has been a battle. It has always been a battle. And for the first time, that conflict isn't it's not a destructive conflict anymore. We're at that first stage of her place that is not a destructive conflict. And I feel that evolution so deeply when I see the work, and when I just knowing the process even. So I joke about things like throwing the painting out in the snow, but that was just fun and funny. But true destruction is in that being so, I've never known Chrissy to be uncertain about anything, but being so conflicted can sometimes be so destructive. And I think that's missing, that's gone now, which is a beautiful next phase. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, very nicely said. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Chrissy, I'm thinking about your title, Held by Mountains, and it's making me think about vessels. And then you talk about the headwaters and whether they'll be here in like 100 years or not. And when I see these paintings and these mountains and these vessels, I think the mountains are going to be here still in 100 years. And whether they're going to be empty or full, just like, vessels that we find from, the ancient times. And they'll be ready to be filled again. And I think that there's some comfort in that. And I see that comfort in your paintings.
Right on. Yeah. The idea of a vessel is awesome, right? I think the first time I learned vessel was in that old Star Wars movie when Buddy goes down and he's like, "Where do you keep the nuclear vessels?" And no one knows. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Those beautiful, beautiful vases, right? The vessel, like, your body is a vessel for your soul. And indeed, the mountains are the vessel, right? They're holding the glacier up. They're holding our headwaters. They're holding the Bow Valley.
The concept they'll empty out and then refill for me is like changing in my perspective, Jen. It's like incredibly changing in how I view it all, because it's all about, trying to find permanence and to really accept that it will empty and it will come back somehow is definitely a shifting perspective.
The ebbs and ebbs and
Flows.
Yeah. Well, those glaciers were growing all the way up until like the 1840s. That was really not that long ago, right?
Well, I think we all breathe in and breathe out. And I sometimes think, when I'm hiking, especially, that I get this sense of breathing in and breathing out with all the stuff around me. And I think that, this idea of the vessel is like that the vessel empties and then it fills because it breathes in and then it breathes out. It seems so simplistic, but it really is so profound. And like Cheryl said, it changes the perspective on how climate change is presented. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the vessel, the playing field of planet Earth will be fun. It's just the drama we have going on right now will change.
That's right.
Chrissy, I've flipped through images just as you were talking, because we were making no association with anything, but I wanted to just flip to this piece at the end of it all, because we're in the last 4 minutes.
I love this painting.
I really enjoyed this, and I hope that people will actually watch this recording. This is an interesting one to re-listen to. But I brought this painting up because I love this painting. I love all of the freedom that the foreground gave you. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit.
Okay, can you say its name, please?
Oh, no, I can't. It's spelled Pobokan.
Little Pond Held by Boulders.
Yes.
Up there on the Highway 93. You just rip by it in the car. I'm pretty sure this rock slide happened before the highway because it's a huge, big, purpley, slatey, dark granite rock, granite with lichen all over it, and just gorgeous. There's guardrail through here, so you don't stop. But luckily on the way back, we had made a plan and we decided, so we stopped and did a quick little sketch. I did 30 sketches in 3 days on black paper, and this was on the last day. And those little pools, ever since this show Held by Mountains, now I can't stop seeing these little pools of ponds everywhere and how awesome they are. These little deep pools of water within compositions. They're gorgeous. They're almost the same shape as a lily pad when you think about it. And yeah, it's a super simple painting. This is one of those paintings that was a gift. I didn't fight with it. The sketch was good. I realized this show, I know I'm pretty old to realize this, but if you like your block in, you're going to like your painting, right? All these years of, every time I don't like a block in, I'm like, it's just a block in. Don't walk away if you don't like the block in, right? How many more hours is it going to take? Like, because, you know, if you like the block in, most likely you have a plan moving forward, and you're gonna like it. And the fluorescent pink, I guess, was a bit of a chance, which wasn't in the block in, but it's popping up into the show, and I talk about it in my self-portrait as kind of happy thoughts and kind of as a vibrancy of sunlight in your life, you know. And it's yeah, I just love this composition. It's almost a square, but it's not, and it reminds me of 4-year-old Arnold for some reason. I have a video of him in front of a painting when he was a baby talking about rocks, and he was like, "These are party rocks," and I was like, "Look at these." Anyway, it's just, it reminds me of my baby, and simple, it worked, and I like the Viridian and pink. I love this painting too, Ramparts. It's I feel successful in the simplification of these horizontal strokes, and I did this sketch in probably like 1.5 minutes. It's a driving on the highway sketch. Like I started drawing on the highway, like Let's Paint live TV guy. And yeah, I painted it, and I did go back into it. Like it's a sketch. It's 30 by 40, I think. And this painting I did in probably 5 hours, and I also did it with the lights off. And I love the cadmium beside the dark, and I just really personally find balance in this piece.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thanks for coming to my talk and making it such a good talk. I'm so glad that other artists came and that we were able to have an artist talk. It was great. Thank you.
I really, really enjoyed this one for sure. Without the 35 questions, there's actually some room to speak. So I feel like we got a lot that's shareable for other people too. A lot of learning. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It was so great to hear everybody's voice. Yeah. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays, group.
Happy holidays.
And Chrissy, I'm glad you're getting better.
Oh,
yes.
That was a long haul.
That was a long haul. And so good to know that you're better. And there is an opening on Saturday. Chrissy is out of quarantine officially by then. Yeah.
Woo-hoo!
And so we are at the stage where we can celebrate together. We are we are going to do an REP opening. So I'm going to check QR codes just so that everybody has some level of whatever comfort you can have. And it's not going to be super crowded. So if please do join us, there's a lot of room to spread out and it'll be nice to see each other for a moment. It's not a kind of food sharing thing. We don't do that anymore. It's just a new world of no food sharing, but we'll enjoy a drink together. We'll enjoy some more art talk. And this is a beautiful show. I've got to tell you, I've got half of it on the wall and it's just a stunner. So I would love everyone to experience it. If you don't feel like gathering in a group, it's up until January 15th. So come see it. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
See you Saturday, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Great
Good night.
seeing you.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
You knocked.